All right. So the first pre-Socratic that we're going to address is a pre-Socratic philosopher, if I can unscrew that, known as Thales. Thales. So Thales is our first pre-Socratic philosopher, and Thales is what's known as a monist, right? Monist, M-O-N-I-S-T. Thales is a monist, and the question is, well, what does it mean to say that someone's a monist, right? What does this mean? Well, a monist is described as following. Monists have the ontological belief that only one thing exists. That only one thing exists, or that everything is reducible to one thing, right? So that everything in the world, all of the apparent existence, is reducible to this one thing. That one thing will vary for many of the monistic pre-Socratics, and we'll see what that one thing is. So for Thales, and we'll talk about this in a minute, for Thales believes that one thing is the source of all things, and that all things are reducible to this one thing, and thus his belief makes him a monist. The question is, what is monism? What does it mean to be a monist? A monist, or monism, is the ontological belief, the being, the existence. Remember, ontology is a theory of being, that existence, that only one thing exists, right? It's the ontological belief that only one thing exists. So we recognize then that Thales was a monist. Thales, however, the question then is, since Thales was a monist, what did he believe everything was reduced to, right? What did he think everything could be reduced to? What is that basic form in nature? And Thales believed that everything is composed of water. Thales believed that everything is composed of water. And you ask yourself, well, how could it be the case that everything is composed of water? Well, what he attempted to do is he attempted to do a reduction. And all monistic pre-Socratics attempt to do this reduction. This reduction is the attempt to say, I have this thing in existence, and let me reduce its properties till I get to a property that can no longer be reduced. Once I get to the property that can no longer be reduced, that's the foundational account. That's where everything starts from. So, for example, you can imagine a tree, right, or leaves on a tree. The leaves on a tree are a product of the tree. The tree is a product of the germination of some type of seed, which is a product of soil, which is a product of water. And it's essentially the water that allows the tree to grow. And that would be an example, as far as Thales is concerned, of reducing a tree to water. And you can, fill in the examples as you will. But Thales' monistic view was that everything was composed of water. And obviously we realize that he's monistic because his idea is that everything is reducible to this thing being water. Okay, so that's Thales. The next person that we have to talk about is Anaximander, A-N-A-X-I-M-A-N-D-E-R. Anaximander, he also is a monist. He also is a monist, Anaximander, and he's from Thales, A-L-E-S. So Anaximander also is a monist, like Thales was a monist. Anaximander is from Thales, and he says, well, this doesn't make any sense, right? That the argument that Thales has, doesn't make any sense to say that everything is composed of water. So Anaximander comes up with a more sort of ingenious idea, and he says that everything is composed of the boundless, right? Everything is composed of the boundless. Everything is composed of the boundless, says B-O-U-N-D-L-E-S-S, right? Everything is composed of the boundless. And the question is, well, why? He thought of what Thales had in mind, as his monistic starting point, that being water. And he thinks to himself, well, that doesn't make sense to say that everything is composed of water, because one of the things that exists in an ontological setting, which I erase, one thing that exists is fire, right? And fire and water, and this is Anaximander's argument, fire and water are incompatible, they're opposites. So it couldn't be the case that you could reduce fire to water, right? And if you're saying that everything is composed of water, well, Anaximander finds a counterexample to that, right? Anaximander's counterexample to water is that the existence of fire couldn't be reduced to water. Therefore, since you can't reduce fire to water, water cannot be our monistic starting point. So what he does is he says that everything is reduced to the boundless. And the reason why he says everything is reduced to the boundless is because the boundless has no opposite. Right? Anaximander says that the boundless has no opposite. So since it has no opposite, everything can be reduced to this point. And in reducing it to this point, then there is no contradiction, right? You can say that everything's the boundless. Now, we don't quite understand what the boundless may mean, and this is going to be the argument eventually against Anaximander, is that what do you mean by the boundless? But at least you can see logically what his train of thought was. His train of thought is, well, I'm going to critique Thales, because Thales believes everything is reducible to water. However, fire exists in the world, and since he said everything is reducible to water, well, clearly fire can't be reducible to water. Therefore, water can't be our starting point. This is just really good analysis, right? His alternative account is to say that it is the boundless. What he attempted to do, what both of them attempted to do, is what's known as the process of reduction. And this process of reduction is the attempt to reduce or simplify to basic initial INITI starting point. Origin. Alright, so reduction or reductionism is the attempt to reduce or simplify something to its basic or initial starting point or origin, right? So we're attempting to reduce something. The idea of reductionism, or the idea of reduction, is the attempt to reduce this thing to its basic starting point, and from that point, then we know what everything else is comprised of, right? So they're both, not only them, all monistic Presocratics construct their ontology, their theory of being, on a theory of reduction, right? So that all monistic Presocratics construct their theory of ontology, the theory of being, on this idea of reduction. Now we see that Thales said that everything was composed of water, and Anaximander said that everything was composed of the boundless. Now, number 3 is Anaximenes. Let me just make sure I spell that right. A-N-A-X-A, no, N-A-X-I, A-N-A-X-I-M-E-N-E-S. Alright, so Anaximenes comes, and Anaximenes also is a monist, right? Anaximenes is also a monist, and Anaximenes thinks to himself, well, I don't know about this idea of the boundless, right? I don't even know if I understand what the boundless means. Anaximander showed that Thales' monistic starting point is wrong, so we can reject that. But I'm going to reject Anaximander's starting point, that everything is boundless, because I don't even know what the boundless means. The closest thing that I can think of, saying to himself, Anaximenes, the closest thing that I can think of that's sort of like the boundless, but is something that actually exists within this world, is air. Right? So he says that everything is composed of air. Right? Anaximenes said everything is composed of air.